ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Colt's Coffee and Conversation. My name is Carl.
And I'm Holly.
I'd like to welcome you back to another exciting episode that we have for you today. We're talking once again about Wild Country.
Yes, and this is the final episode. Of the documentary.
The documentary, yes. It's been a journey so far.
Yes.
A lot of highs, a lot of lows, a lot of likes, dislikes.
Yes, and we're going to find out more about that and wrap this up. Well, actually, we're going to have one more episode after our wrap-up.
Yes, the wrap-up show.
But tonight, we are going to talk about episode 6.
Yes, episode 6. But before we get into that, we must do our disclaimer. We are just normal, standard human beings. We are Joe and Jane Smith. We have regular jobs. We do not hold degrees in any theology or anything of that nature. So, that's done. Let's care to dive in.
Well, before that, we have to talk about what we're drinking with our coffee.
Well, I have my delicious juniper latte, 2 pumps, not 4, because to me it's the perfect amount. But what are you drinking, Holly?
I'm having a hot, toasted...
White mocha?
Yes. Yum.
All right, okay.
All right, let's get to it.
All right, here we go. So, real quick, before we get into it, if you have not watched it, I don't know why you wouldn't have watched it, but if you haven't watched it, we recommend that you do, so you can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about. But if you haven't, we'll do our best to describe everything. But this episode goes back and forth so many times through so many different people that it's going to be a little bit, I don't want to say dicey, but it just goes back and forth so much, so please bear with us.
Yes, we're going to try to keep everything so you'll know who's speaking and who is doing what.
Yeah, so bear with us, but let's go. You ready to go on that journey?
I am ready.
Let's take a walk down wild country. So the episode begins, and of course, first thing we see is the plane taking off. That's right, the Bhagwan is trying to escape. Now, during this time, you see a Swami coming into here, and he says that, they're talking about how, if you were listening to the previous episode where he said, oh, shit, that's not good. Pardon the language, but that's verbatim. This is when he finally takes off, and the commune and the community just found out that he loaded a plane and he's taken off. So what they started doing is they started to try to get a hold of the airplanes while it's in the air. Now, Swami feels that the communication was being blocked by the government.
Yes. They tried to call the plane, as they said it, for 4 hours. Hasio was saying for 4 hours. And I'm not sure how you would call a plane in those days. I don't know how we would do it today, actually. We would have to do it through the FCC.
Probably through the radio.
Maybe they have some kind of a radio, someone who does radio communications. But anyway, they weren't able to get an answer.
They gotta have a tower if they have an airport.
So they were blocking the communications.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. Now they're saying that there was a guess on where they was heading to, and the closest place they would head to would be Bermuda. Why? Well, for 2 reasons. 1, it's warm, and 2, there's no extradition in Bermuda. The planes that took off, there's actually 2 of them. Now, they don't know which plane is holding the Bhagwan. Like I said, there's 2 planes. One lands in Salt Lake City, Utah to refuel, and the other one lands in Pueblo, Colorado to fuel up as well. What happens is once they have already left those 2 areas, they both begin to head over to Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, during this time, you see the government scrambling to trying to figure out where they're actually going to, and they realize that Robert Weaver was realizing that the closest place they would probably be able to refuel that made the most sense would be Charlotte. So they gather up all the state troopers that they could find, the FBI, and also local police to make the arrest.
Now, why would they have such a force just for a couple of airplanes or jets with a few people in it?
Well, because the possible heavy armament that they did carry.
Yeah, because they came from a place that was heavily weaponized.
Absolutely. And also, this is the man. This is their leader. This is their god. So, of course, they're going to protect him at all costs. So, anyway, what happens is they land the plane around 2 a.m., and they were correct. It was at Charlotte. What happened was that I guess when they landed, they were at the wrong terminal, though. So they ended up running heading towards it to make sure that they were able to get to the plane before anybody disembarked.
Right, they actually told them, they told the pilots to go to a certain area where they were staged,
Yeah.
but they didn't. They were going to some other hangar.
Some other hangar.
And
yeah.
they ended up having to
Hustle.
run over to them,
Yeah,
and
basically.
they stopped them.
Yeah, so what happened is they surrounded the plane, and the good thing was no shots were fired. Now, when they boarded the plane, they found the Bhagwan, and now he was hiding behind a seat. What they were able to find, besides the Bhagwan, was a total of $55,000 in cash, a lot of guns, boxes of jewelry, and, of course, his infamous throne. During this time they're making the arrest, obviously he's making large news. You see Mishanti B pop up right on screen, and she was describing on what they were watching because obviously it was international news.
Right, now she remember she was in Germany with the group in a pension, which is a vacation hotel in the Black Forest.
Yes.
Which is in southern Germany, 50 miles from Switzerland.
Yes. The episode prior, they were afraid to do a separate arrest. They were trying to arrange it to make two arrests at the same time. Make it so if it was on television, the group would be able to easily pack up and run. And
they were in shock just looking at it on television, saying, "Oh my gosh, there's the Bhagwan, and he's in chains, walking with the federal authorities, marshals." Yeah. And then the next thing you know,
the knock at the door. While they're watching the story, the FBI and the German secret police were at their door with warrants for their arrest, and the warrants were for three people specifically: Sheila, Mishanti B, and Mom Prem Puja. And now that was for the attempted murder of the Bhagwan's doctor. Now, during this time, now obviously the Bhagwan is now in chains. The Bhagwan is now indicted by the state of Oregon. It is actually official. They finally got their hands on him because they were. In the previous
it was
episode,
a secret indictment. They wouldn't tell anybody what it was.
That's correct. If you listen to the previous episode, there was that secret indictment. You are correct. And they were trying to figure out how they were going to infiltrate and get inside the ranch to actually get their hands on the Bhagwan.
Without having a major war.
Conflict. Because, remember, they were thinking of a Jonestown situation. So this is what happens, is they have him in jail. You see that during this time he becomes a local celebrity because... he
was the biggest prisoner they ever had.
He was the biggest prisoner they ever had, and you see them that some of the locals are selling T-shirts.
They'll make a buck off of anything, right?
And the most popular, you show the news story that a couple people in a diner are saying that, well, if he's not breaking any laws, I don't see why he can't do what it is, freedom of religion. I think it's what it was. But the other
something of that nature.
And then another guy's like, wow, I'm fascinated by his wealth. 94 Rolls Royces. That's amazing. That's astounding. During this time, of course. Since he's apparently an international celebrity. Of course, flowers are going to be coming, and flowers do show up to the jail, even to the chief of police.
That's right, they
because
did.
They were taking such good care
of
the Bhagwan.
They said it looked like a flower shop.
It looked like a flower shop, and they were beautiful flowers. There was some nice arrangements. The Bhagwan himself, they were asking the chief of police about how he is. He says he's a fantastic inmate. He moves very little. He also is using earplugs to block out the noise of the prison. He eats vegetarian meals, which they do give him. And, of course, 24-hour nurses and medical attention. So it looks like he's in the medical ward.
Right.
Or the medical unit,
we've suspected that he was failing in his health.
Yes, he was. So then, of course, it pans over to Swami. Now, he says, his first mind is, I need to get him out. Because, obviously, he's in jail. So then, of course, during this time as he's heading over there, of course, the Bhagwan is, once again, is a celebrity. They have him in cuffs, so guess what? It's time to do an interview. So, of course, they do an interview with him.
Now, the interview is from the news media.
It's from the news media, that is correct. And he is in jail. And they asked him about, is it awkward and embarrassing? And he says, it's absolutely awkward and embarrassing. I'm absolutely innocent. I have not done any crime. He feels that the Constitution will help him and his commune. Of course, Swami shows up and he says that during this time when he's preparing for all of this, he got to spend a lot of time with him, and
because he was the only sannyasin who could go in there because he was the lawyer.
He was a lawyer.
So he would sit on the floor. The Bhagwan would sit on the chair in the lawyer's quarters
or the meeting room.
Yes,
yeah.
And he would be there feeling renewed.
Yeah, he was there for hours and hours and hours with them. So the official indictment is immigration fraud because he lied about the reasons for being in the country. and then also the arrange of the sham marriages.
Now let's talk about his lying about his reasons for staying in
Yeah.
the United States. So
Yeah.
the first thing, he came over as a dissident.
That's correct.
The next thing he changed it
For the
is a
renewal.
religious worker.
For a religious worker, that's correct.
Okay, so now the religious worker, why wouldn't that stay with why wouldn't he still have that protection?
Well, because he decided to kill that religion. Remember, he said, "If the first time in human history a religion has died," so therefore that just erased every reason for him to actually be in the United States.
Okay, so, and we were thinking about if he had a 501c3,
Oh yeah.
and that would protect him under the law, but if it was now no longer a religion, that would go away.
Yes, that's correct. When you're talking about the indictment, on details of the indictment, Swami says that everything was about Sheila, but nothing about. Well, he says Osho, but we're just, the Bhagwan. Now, if he was not a guru, then they would have just put a decent bail, and then would let him go. But since he was a guru, they treated him differently.
I take difference to that.
Hmm.
Swami says that anybody else, they would have just gotten a bail and they would have been released. But you see, what he doesn't realize, he realizes he doesn't want to say he was fleeing the country. He had the money.
Yeah.
B, he had the resources. He had it all set up. He was a flight risk. They're not going to allow someone bail that's a flight risk.
Good point. That's a great point. And of course, this is what he was facing. He was facing 175 years in prison and $350,000 in fines.
Right, and that would be a big flight risk.
You think?
Yeah.
Because he was already in flight when they arrested him. So of course, Swami throws it on to saying that we're dealing with more of a political issue than anything
Which I do
else.
agree, it was a political.
To a certain extent,
Yes.
I do, yes. But all this is the reason why. My feelings towards this is that you created this mess, and now you try to run from the mess, and now you got to pay the piper, and now you're like, oh.
Oh, and
but
by
I'm
the
just...
way, Sheila's not there to help you.
Yeah, right. And she's not there to help you, or protect you, or give advice. You're surrounded by yes men. Okay, so now of course it changes over to Robert Weaver. Now, Robert Weaver, of course, obviously is the lawyer. Now he's
an attorney general.
He's the attorney general. Yes, he was charged with multiple crimes. This is what he's saying in regards to this. After he was saying that Swami was saying, well, this is just a political thing. This is Robert Weaver saying he's charged with multiple crimes. He tried to flee the U.S. He abandoned all of his followers, and he was aware of the charges. And he fled before he got caught. That was that was him. Now, also, it's in an interview that they did show him from 1985. Still, Robert Weaver saying that 3 days after the indictment was returned by the grand jury, he leaves the ranch for the first time in 4 years and flies across the country in the middle of the night. So, yeah, what do you expect the government to think? So then, of course, it pans over back to Sheila. Now, remember, like I said, guys, this is going back and forth. So there's so much going on so quickly that you have to really pay attention to what's going on.
So Sheila's in Germany.
Yes.
And all three, that means Shanti B, Sheila, and Pooja.
Maprem
Pooja,
who was the nurse lady who gave out the drugs to the street people's beer and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
So all three of them were housed in the same cell.
Yes, they were in the same cell, and of course, they're in Germany. And obviously, remember the episode before, they did that big, huge story on that magazine.
Stern magazine.
And they sold so many copies. So what do you think she was doing in jail?
Signing autographs. And those signing autographs were on those posed nude,
the nude
photos of Sheila.
Yeah, that's
okay,
correct.
Of course.
So of course she was doing that, but then Shanti B shows up and pops up into the screen and says, once the FBI showed up, the shackles came on, and we were handed over from the German special police to the FBI. Now their indictment, this is what it was, all three of them for attempted murder in the first degree. That's one of the charges, a conspiracy to commit murder, arson, and illegal wiretapping. Now, of course, they're already in U.S. custody. William Gary, who's my favorite human being of this entire fantastic play, as they say, he has those nice little jabs, but he's so professional. It's smooth delivery. He says that it struck him how unimposing and small she was. He assumes that Sheila answered the questions honestly and complete forthcoming, but he did notice that there was no traces of shame or remorse. He left thinking that Sheila had no empathy at all, And this quote really sums it up, which I made my eyebrows raise every time I heard it. If she spent the rest of her life in jail, it would not be an excessive sentence. So he really thinks, well, remember, he was the one who said in the beginning, was it pure evil?
Yeah, it was a pure evil.
It was a pure evil. So
yes.
So he's got a really, I like his way of words. So anyway, so back to the Bhagwan. So of course they have him in Charlotte, but of course he's a prisoner. Where is he needed to be in? Oregon. So they got to get him to Oregon. Well, guess what? The government decided to have I think the government decided to have I think they decided to have some fun with him. Looking at this, it looked like it was on purpose, but stranger things have happened. Of course, he leaves Charlotte, North Carolina. Then he goes to Springfield, Missouri.
Now, this is on a airplane. It's on a jet, and it's on Con Air, as we would put it. It's the U.S. Marshals.
U.S. Marshals, yeah.
They have a network of jets that they move prisoners around the country.
They do. Well, here's his little trip. First he goes to Springfield, Missouri. Then he goes to Oklahoma City. Then he goes to Glendale, Arizona. Then he goes to Long Beach. Then he goes to Vandenberg Air Force Base. Then he goes to Sacramento. And then, for some strange reason, they fly over Portland to go to Seattle, Washington, and then they show up to Portland, Oregon. Now, during his nice little travel, that was a 3-week process, by the way. So obviously,
and every time he lands, mostly he has to get off of the plane and goes through the whole process of the chain walk, getting patted down, getting in a new cell. I mean, it's the whole process.
Yeah, and one of the things was that he was placed with an inmate with contagious herpes. That was delightful to see. But after all that, they admitted that he was ready to surrender. So the government used loopholes against him to kind of mess with him.
Well, also I wanted to mention, too, they knew his medical condition because obviously they had nurses and everything checked out in the first holding place that they had him in North Carolina, in Charlotte.
Yeah.
So they knew his conditions. They would have to, part of the rules also, as I read on this Con Air jet network that the marshals have, you have to have the right medications and everything has to be in order to go onto the airplane.
Right, and that's just exhausting alone.
So they knew his medical.
Yeah.
Okay, number one. And number two, they are chained up on the seats. There's no
lounging.
No, there's no lounging. There's no food.
This ain't a first-class flight, baby.
Yeah, the food there is bologna sandwiches, cookie, milk, simple like child lunchbox food.
Pretty much.
And they're very uncomfortable, and there's nothing to entertain them.
Nope.
So this is really wear someone down.
Yes, I believe so. So yeah, so of course Swami shows up, and of course Sheila's looking at poisoning to officials, burning down the Wasco County office.
Now these are her
charges that Swami's talking about.
Okay.
And here's his concern. Swami's main concern is that if Sheila did all this, because mind you, he doesn't know all this, which... Well, I'll keep that comment to myself for the close-up show. If Sheila did all this, she could testify against Bhagwan, but he, of course, obviously says Osho the entire time, but we all know it's Bhagwan, that the Bhagwan would be set on trial. But Sheila says
that she never intended to bargain for her freedom by turning against the Bhagwan.
Yeah, because she still... loves him.
Yes, and she said she knew she had to face her own misery.
She had to face her own misery, that's correct. So, of course, we have the guilty pleas. All three of them plead guilty. First, Sheila, she pleads guilty. She gets 4.5 years in jail with $469,000 in fines. And then when she is released from jail, she is to leave the U.S. Now, Miss Shanti B, she gets 10 years in prison. Now, mind you, all this is federal time. This is not... in state prison, this is federal prison. During this time, when you talk about Shanti B and her sentencing, Peter, her son, visits him, and then she sees the pain that she...
Now, Peter's about a teenager, isn't he?
I think he's a teenager, yeah. And he's still at the ranch.
Yeah, he's still at Rajneeshpuram.
Yeah, he's still at Rajneeshpuram, because she only left with her daughter. She saw the pain in his eyes, and that it was the seed that planted... This are her words, that the seed was planted to break the spell. And we'll get into that little phrase later on. Now, of course, Ma Aman Puja, she gets 4.5 years in prison. Oh, I'm sorry, 4.5 years in prison and 3 years of probation.
She also pleads guilty.
And she does plead
So
guilty.
all of this sounds like they were plea deals.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, they didn't go to trial.
They did not go to trial at all. No, they did not go to trial. Now, they're done, good to go. They're all locked up. That takes care of the three ladies. Now it's time about the man himself, Bhagwan. Now, of course, Swami, he's the lawyer. And this is what he tells them: if you fight this, you'll be in court for 6 weeks and win. But they will keep coming after you no matter what. Now, he recommends a deal for him to leave. And
Okay,
course,
but before that, they had three attorneys.
yes, they did
that
have
were
three
special
attorneys. That is
attorneys.
correct.
They were
Special
not
attorneys.
sannyasins. They
No.
were just professional attorneys
Yes.
in that field of law. And they all said that the government had a very weak case.
They did.
And hence why the Bhagwan was thinking, well, maybe I should fight it. I will fight it all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And he said, but
His body.
but Swami just said, well, what you said, it was going to be a 6-week trial.
It's going to be a 6 week
Yeah.
trial. This is and that. Of course, he said that he would take it all to the Supreme Court, which you are correct, but his body just couldn't take it. So that 3-week plane ride really
Well,
took its
yeah,
toll.
in fact, one of the attorney generals said that's when he surrendered because of that journey.
That journey, it's only 3 weeks. Okay, so now it fades to Robert Weaver. Now, Robert Weaver obviously is representing the state of Oregon. Now, he talks about the aura inside the courtroom. And he said it was very dark, and they were sending all those dark vibes towards him.
Now,
so
who
you
was
see in the
sending
court,
it?
the sannyasins that were actually inside the courtroom.
So there was a bunch of sannyasins that went to the courtroom.
Went to the trial. That is correct. And of course, they're just standing. And now, of course, obviously during this time, they didn't have anything recording. It was all just drawings.
The court artists.
The court artists. Now, they show the artists the drawings. And of course, you see them all with their evil looks staring at him while he's, putting the everybody on trial. Exactly.
Yeah, it was sending it up his spine.
Up his spine, that's correct. Now, the court artist was saying that the aura was only matched when she was in the presence of the Ayatollah Khomeini. Now, if you guys don't know who the Ayatollah Khomeini is, Google it. That guy, you see his picture, he's pretty scary. They actually kind of look alike, now think about it.
Well,
No,
yeah, he was from Iran.
Yeah.
Iran. Okay.
All right, so anyway, back to focus. The Bhagwan, he does plead guilty. Now,
because they made a deal.
because they made a deal, that's correct. Now, there's no jail time here. He's leaving the country. That's what the whole plan was in the beginning, to get rid of him. So, of course, he does leave the country. Now, he goes literally straight from the courthouse, straight to the airport, onto a plane, and he is gone. And his quote was saying at the end, "I will never return to the U.S."
I have one thing to say.
Yes.
After this, outside the court, they were all talking. The media was out there interviewing the attorneys and everything, what was going on. And one of the questions was from an anchorman who was viewing this I guess it was to the attorney general, and said,
That was Robert Weaver.
yeah, he said, why, if you're letting him leave, why didn't you just let him leave in the first place? Why did you, grab him and take it through this whole process? And the answer was, well, because we have laws, and we can't just let somebody go just because they can say, well, I was able to get away from the government.
Yeah, fled justice,
Right.
yeah.
So we had an opportunity, we kept him, we put him through, and that's what our laws are all about.
Right. No, good observation. Now, of course, it goes straight over to Mr. and Mrs. McGreer, the elderly couple from episodes 2 and 3. Actually, and 1. All 3, but they do more focus on well, at that time it was Rajneesh Puram.
Yeah, but they were the people in Antelope.
That's correct. So anyway, of course you see them, and of course all they say is, "We were relieved and happy." The community had a big sigh of relief. Now let's quote. Now, of course, since everything's done, everyone's arrested, everyone is in jail or out of the country, what about the ranch?
So Swami had responsibilities.
Swami, remember, he was the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
He was the mayor.
Plus, he was their attorney.
And he was their attorney. Now, of course, the followers now, once he's gone, There's no purpose or reason to even stay in Oregon. And of course, guess what? Everyone's leaving the sinking ship. The legal situations drained all of the finances.
Mm-hmm.
According, there's no need to stay anyway. So He's gone. There's no money to sustain the community. There's no point in staying. And of course, they did have some street people saying, "I'm staying here until they kick me off."
Which they probably did.
Which they probably did. So, of course, they shows a Swami, and Swami, he's saying he's leaving the ranch after the trial. There was no point for him to stay.
Well, he had a lot of pressure. He was trying to, do all this stuff, but it just got so overwhelming. And I think it was his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Was Isabel.
Yeah.
And she had some responsibilities of authority there, but they went off to a little retreat in the mountains, and Isabel said, I have to leave. And so he says, I'm going with you.
Yeah. So he leaves the ranch, and of course he's reminiscing on what they've created and what was there. And no, I'm going to keep that comment for the show as well, or for the wrap-up show. Yeah, and then of course it goes to Sunny, who, Sunshine. I have to do that every time I say her name now. I've been doing it, actually. So anyway, Sunshine leaves the ranch, and she starts reminiscing the same thing, and there's bringing some tears to her eyes, because you know what? She was there from the beginning, too. She wasn't just a Johnny-come-lately. She was there from the beginning. Now, to the Antelope people, Rajneeshpuram, now known as Antelope once again. So, of course, everyone's leaving. Guess what? It's time for the people to take back their community. They renamed the town back again to Antelope. They changed the street signs, because remember when they actually took over Antelope and they changed it to Rajneeshpuram, they changed all the street signs and everything else. So they got their town back, and of course they had a banner saying Antelope hostages ... free at last. Of course they elected a new government, because obviously everyone who was in charge originally at the ranch have left. Then they also installed a flagpole with a plaque on it. Now this is what the plaque reads: dedicated to those of this community who throughout the Rajneesh invasion and occupation of 1981 to 1985 remained resistant and remembered. And then the second part is a quote: the only thing necessary for triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, by Edmund Burke.
We were talking about this. It reminds me still of Red Dawn.
Yep, the ending of Red Dawn, where they talk about the plaque. Yes, you are
about
correct.
The plaque, yes.
That was in Colorado. Now, of course, the community just wasn't there anymore. The town was just a little bit of a shell of itself.
Well, because a lot of people left.
A lot of people left, yeah, remember?
And they're not coming back.
They're not coming back, no. So, basically, over half the town was bought up. They at least bought half or 2/3 of the town. They bought the cafe. So, during this time, you see just the decay of the city of Antelope.
Right, and this is a place that not everyone's going to come to. There's not anybody backfilling all these places. So when the original townspeople left because of the Rajneeshis, bought them out, then now the Rajneeshis are all leaving, okay, because they don't own that property. That was part of the organization. So individuals did not own those homes in Antelope.
That's correct.
So they're all leaving. Mm-hmm. So there's no one to take, the cafe is done, the school is done, and nobody's there to backfill even today. I mean, I would be interested in going there just to see what was left.
Yeah.
And this is, 85, 95, 2005. Okay, so this is 30
years ago.
30
plus
over
years
30,
ago, yeah.
Yeah. Or 30 plus years ago, and it's not grown.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. So, of course, that's pretty much it. Kind of fades to black on that. And then, of course, guess who pops up? Good old Sheila. Now, this is the interview that she did when she was in prison.
So this was in 1987, I believe. I remember that.
Okay.
She was interviewed by somebody in the media.
Yes, and then, of course, they talked about the poisoning of the town. And, of course, she said people get sick all the time. It's not. She's basically saying, we didn't do it,
she said, why should I care? People get sick every day, all the time.
Yeah. And then, of course, she laughed at the Oregonians.
Yeah, the Oregonians. She laughed at them. She says, you think, you're laughing at me because I'm in prison, but I'm laughing at you because you missed the teachings of the Bhagwan and that intelligence. You didn't understand the Bhagwan. You didn't understand me, and you missed out.
Yeah, and, of course, during that interview, there was no remorsefulness at all. She didn't care for the U.S. or their laws. That was her words. But
well, and we know that because all through this whole process when she started, she never really cared for our laws, because only just to use them against.
Yeah, just to take advantage of them. That's
Yes.
correct. And of course, she said she wasn't going to talk to her about her experiences in jail either. So, there we go. And then, of course, now that we're done with Sheila at that time, and of course, guess what? What happened to the Bhagwan? He went right back to India.
He still had followers
He had
there.
tons of followers because as he got off the airplane, that airport in Delhi was packed. And, then they never got rid of their place in Pune.
No.
They never got rid of it. It's still there.
That was a wise move.
That was a very, right, backup plan. Oh, thank you, Sheila.
Yeah, probably.
Probably. So, of course, he's speaking now. At this moment, he's speaking about his experience in the United States. He says, quote, "If they harass me, they can harass you." The Oregon was a beautiful experiment that failed. Now, remember, he doesn't have, according to him, it was Sheila's idea about Oregon, not him.
But that's not true.
But that's not, it's definitely not true. So, of course, they're back in Pune, or Pune is now what they call as Pune. Of course, during this time, he's lost pretty much, his Rolls Royce fleet collection's gone.
Well, I think that he's ill. We know that.
He's not feeling well.
He's not feeling well.
He's probably depressed.
He's failing. And so he's decided he's not the Bhagwan anymore.
He's no longer
He's
Bhagwan.
not that person. So Swami says, well, we got to call you something. So what are we going to call you, Prince? And so it ended up that someone suggested that they call him Osho, which is a Japanese term for a revered master.
Yeah. So
that's where Osho comes in as the new name that he goes by for the rest of his life. And now his books and everything
now are Osho
Osho
instead of Bhagwan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because it's funny because in the beginning you're like, oh, who is this Osho person that Swami's speaking of in episode 1, and everyone else is saying Bhagwan. And of course you put 2 and 2 together, but it's a nice little cliffhanger about when he changes his name.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so of course his health is failing, and then of course he is now no longer speaking again.
Well, yeah, he can't. He probably doesn't have the gumption to do it.
Yeah, so all he was basically doing was he was going to the Buddha Hall, and he was just coming out to bless the people.
Now the Buddha Hall was their big meeting area.
Yeah, it was their big old huge tent area like they had back in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And of course.
And so so there was so Swami is telling the story. He decided, well, you know what? He found out that Osho was back in. Well, he was in India, so obviously he was there. But there was a time when he came out to bless the people. Swami said he was about in the third row.
Third row, yeah.
And he saw his toe over the podium, and he was just willing him to stay alive, like trying to say, put
channel
his channel his energy into it. So he must have felt something. But see, now to me, this whole story that he tells, and we'll tell the rest of it. Then a day goes by, and then everyone is told to come back to the Buddha Hall.
Back to the Buddha Hall, yep.
And they're having a big meeting.
Yes.
The doctor comes out.
Yeah.
And he announces that Osho has passed away, that his life left his body.
Yeah.
And that there was, he says, I give you my dream.
That was his last words.
Yes.
I give you my dream.
I give you my dream. Then everybody in the Buddha Hall, because they're trained this way and this is how they believe, they kind of start celebrating.
Yeah, they started celebrating
instead of
his
weeping
life,
and wailing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They celebrate his life, and they're shouting and
dancing
all that.
And all that stuff,
I don't know what Swami was doing at that point,
No,
but
it doesn't mention
I
it.
think he was sort of like in a daze,
Probably in a euphoric
shock.
state, yeah.
Of
course, then they do show the funeral.
And that was pretty quick
It was
after.
very quickly. I think it's in the same meeting.
Really?
It's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, it does, huh? Because
It
they
does.
want to say this is what happened. They all celebrate. Then they bring him, and they have.
It's very weird, yeah.
Well, they have a different way.
They have a different way of doing
in
it, yeah.
India.
And of course, they have their way of celebrating. It was just, to me, it looked like it was like, okay, he passed away, yay! Bring out the body, woo!
Well, that's what they did,
That's
and then they had
that's what it looked like.
Flowers. They had like pallbearers, only they were all women in white robes.
Yeah, well, he was on a stretcher, but he was covered in flowers,
Mm-hmm.
and they went straight to the crematorium for his body to be burned. So, of course,
Well, they don't mess around. They don't have all
they don't have
the
that.
cremation
Yeah.
or the stuff to preserve your body.
Yeah, so of course there's Swami. Of course there's tears in his eyes. Like I said, with Swami, this is my one thing I'm going to say. He legitimately loves Osho.
Mm-hmm.
He legitimately has love for this guy. So I kind of feel him there. I feel him there.
Well, he was a true believer also.
He was a true believer. And of course, all I could say was he was such a gift. He said that a couple times. Now, of course, the ashes, now they were walked through the streets with celebration. And, of course, they see, an older gentleman carrying the urn. And, of course, there were flowers, petals being thrown everywhere. Of course, like I said, they were celebrating. Different culture. Okay, so then, of course, Mishanti B pops up into screen. And, of course, that she felt strongly indifferent when he died. She said it was something behind me. Now she feels like she was she was in prison for all those time for 10 years.
Oh, and actually, she didn't go 10 years. She only did like 3.5 to 4 years.
3.5, 4, okay.
Yeah, she did that.
And then she went home.
She came out of prison. She was 43 years old, but was a child. In other words, she didn't mature beyond what she should have been.
Yeah, no, because remember, she packed her and her family up in her early 20s to India.
Yeah.
So, from Australia to India. Though, of course, then she talks about, moving on with her life. She built a juice bar in Germany.
Well, her parents welcomed her home because she had nowhere to go. So the parents welcomed her. I believe the parents must have been in Germany.
It's possible. Well, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Because she did go back to Germany.
She did go back to Germany, yeah. Where she had the juice bar, and that's where she met her husband. So that raises other questions because I know when she left Australia, she had her husband and her children. So
I don't think that lasted.
That may have not lasted. I really don't know. I still have to read that book.
Oh, I know, but
she has a book. We'll talk about it in the wrap-up show. Anyway, now she still had an arrest warrant for some reason in Portland.
Well, yeah, she did. So she had this arrest warrant, but let's talk about. Oh, yeah. So she had this arrest warrant. She was charged, remember, for trying to kill the doctor.
Right.
Of the arson.
Yeah.
And of course, all the conspiracy with it.
Right.
Okay. What she wasn't charged with, they found out later after they dug through every bit of
I don't know
paperwork.
any of this, so this is new.
I know. After they dug through every bit of paperwork, she had already been in her prison sentence.
And she did her sentence for those crimes.
And she left the country legitimately.
Yes, she did.
Then they dug up in like 1989-90. She's already gone. They found out of her assassination attempt.
Oh, that's right!
Of Charles Turner.
Oh, my gosh.
They didn't know that. So they found out that she had the assassination attempt. She did the guns.
She was hanging out the McDonald's across the street with the coffee and smoking a cigarette for the first time.
Yes, and she went to Texas before that.
That's right.
She went and bought all those guns. Yes. And then she took him back over state lines. She gave him, that whole
I totally forgot about that. I thought that was
it was not taken care of.
Oh my
and hence why she had
right.
an international arrest warrant for her, which go on to the next.
But yeah, no, because
next step.
Yeah, because when she's in Germany, she can't get extradited in Germany.
Right. Well, no. Well, right.
If she stayed in Germany, she could be free. She's fine.
Yeah,
but if she leaves it, she's internationally wanted by the Interpol. Okay. No. I did not know that. I'm legitimately
so
did not know.
There's a reason.
So, reason why. Well, this is what happened. She got a phone call in the middle of the night, and it was about her son. Her son had a tumor.
Now he's grown up and married at this point, and he lives in Australia.
Oh, yes, it's correct. He moved back to Australia. He had a tumor. In order for her to go see her son in Australia, because he is passing away because the tumor was a deadly tumor, she had to go back to Portland.
Well, yeah, because she couldn't go.
She had to go to Portland.
She had to clear this up.
Clear this up. So basically, what happened was, this is what happened was that her and her husband decided to say, you know what, I want to see my son. I can't do this. So she goes. Her and her husband get on a plane straight to Portland, and this is where I almost cried.
Right, they go up. They go to Portland. Into the courthouse.
She goes to Face of Music. That's what she says. She goes to Face of Music. She's in court. She reads a statement, which she doesn't mention what she did in the statement, but I'm pretty sure she explained what happened, and that she said her statement. What did the judge say?
Okay, so basically after her statement, the judge said something about, sometimes judgment trumps mercy, and that's okay.
Yes.
But sometimes mercy overcomes judgment, and in this case, that's what it is. So he sentenced her to time served.
So
Boom.
yes, so once the gavel hit, she was
She
was
was
no
free.
longer a criminal. She was free to go, and her statement was so, I guess, heartfelt that not only did the judge, congratulate her, but so did the FBI agents. They were all on her side.
Everybody was on her side.
Everybody was on her side. So good for her.
So she was no longer a criminal, and she could go to her son.
To her son, where he ended up unfortunately passing away of the tumor. But at least she was there. That's awesome. To whatever extent you want to take it. Now, that we're done with her. Now it's Sheila. Dun dun dun. After prison. So of course she's talking about it. She felt that she left the hypocrisy,
which was Bhagwan.
Which is the Bhagwan. She wanted to to be open about the Bhagwan sannyasins, to look at the reality of the whole situation. Because guess what happened? Here's a nice little twist, which I forgot.
Bhagwan did not have
He did not die a natural death. No, he did not. What happened was that the doctor who wrote the death certificate
was not
that doctor that we're thinking of, ladies and gentlemen.
It was an outside doctor, like a coroner.
It was a
or
coroner.
Like
yes,
that.
It was not the
sannyasin
doctor. No, that was not him. It was no. He said that on the death certificate it was an overdose, so he died. So what happened was that everything started coming out about the inner circle. Now the inner circle is, from what it looks like the Hollywood crowd. It definitely was the doctor.
There's 20 people in
20 people total. The doctor was one of them.
Hasia, which married the doctor.
Sonny was another one. And whomever, fill in the blanks.
Yeah, the people that we don't know.
People we don't know. But this is what Sheila had to say about the inner circle. The same people who were drugging him were the same people who were looting him for his riches. It was, in her past, she
is moving
forward in her life. She feels that she has
come out with an
upper hand, despite what the world thinks of her. She feels like she's above and beyond. Good.
But also, when she's talking at this point, she's talking to the current people in charge.
Yeah, the current sannyasins.
Yeah, and they're in Osho International or whatever it is. And she's specifically talking to them because this is her platform. And she says, it was your responsibility to take care of Bhagwan.
Yeah,
at least in my time, he was safe. What had she learned? Well, she learned to implement the Bhagwan's teaching in her daily life, and then she is now going on to another enterprise. And so you want to talk about what she's doing currently.
Now she says she has a new commune, and that is with old and young people, schizophrenia to dementia, from Parkinson's to Alzheimer's. She didn't want the old people to be rejected. Now, when she's talking about this and they're showing the house that she lives in, I know she has a couple of them. It's not just one.
Right. She has like a few of these homes.
A few of these homes. Mm-hmm. Now, the Bhagwans, she still calls it the Bhagwan. Does not call her Osho. Calls him Bhagwan.
No, she wasn't there when
wasn't
it
there.
was
So he's
Osho.
always Bhagwan.
Yeah.
So there's photos of him all over the house. She's
with
still,
her in it too. By the way.
Yes, I did see that. Mm-hmm. Now it's a resting home for all elderly people, and this is what I thought was beautiful. It was her comment about this. It was a wonderful way to say thank you to existence.
Yes.
So it's a nice little, and when she's talking about it, you see the people and the folks that are living in there. She's saying that they can stay here until their last dying day. Yeah. They're treated like human beings. Like
they sing, they dance.
I mean, it made me smile.
And comfort.
Yeah, it made me smile. I'm not gonna lie, it made me smile.
Oh, that's great.
I'm not that much of a jerk, but it made me feel good. It really made me feel happy. It's like, well, you know what? I'm not completely redeeming my opinions about you, but you know what? Good for you. You know what? Pay for your crimes. No, I was kidding.
Well, she did say that just to let you know, she says she had paid for all of her crimes in the United States. And that's it. And she says in Europe and Switzerland, she says once you pay for your crimes and you don't continue being a criminal, you are not a criminal.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about that, and I said, well, that's true, because with our system, hey, you're a felon, you're a felon, you're a felon. Even if you haven't done anything for 20 years, you're still a felon.
Yeah.
You can't vote. There's other privileges.
Well, it comes off your record, but there's certain things that you can't do anymore.
Yeah, but you're still a felon.
Still considered
a felon.
Now,
in Europe, as she's saying, or in specifically Switzerland, because that is a very neutral country, you know.
Very.
When you've paid your debt to society, you don't have that
you don't have
label anymore.
That label anymore, yeah. So anyway, so now it goes over to the sannyasins now, which is off. So we just kind of
Osho International.
Osho International. We kind of leaked it out a little bit earlier.
Okay.
Now it still has plenty of communities in South America, Asia, and Europe. Yeah, I don't think it's going to fly over here in the United States. They may have one.
Yeah, they might.
They might. I ain't looking.
We didn't look.
Who cares? Well, something for the wrap-up show. Maybe I might
Yeah, that's
care.
true. Yeah.
But Puna's still thriving. People still visit there. A lot of Europeans still visit there.
And they showed it, and it looks very resort-like.
It's very resort-like.
And very calm and clean, and nothing
it's
which
thriving.
you would think of India.
Yeah,
you know?
no, and then there's computers to show you all the classes you can take.
I'm sure, though, you pay quite a bit of money.
Oh, yeah.
Because they probably have places
but that
to stay.
Thing, yeah, well, you think of it this way, when you kind of take a look at the timeline now versus then, they owned it back in the 70s. So it's pretty much...
Well, right. And I believe that the Bhagwan had, quite a bit of money.
He had money.
And now they've been going on and on with these publications.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
Well, they have they just recently signed 1,000 book contracts and in 50 different languages. So
all over the world.
It's all over the world. So his teachings are still being taught to this day. Mm-hmm. So the machine is still running.
Yep.
Okay, so now then it ends to good old Mr. John Silvertooth. We haven't seen him in quite a few. So here's Mr. Silvertooth, and this is what he says. I think it was a fleece since day one. I thought that he was just an old con man, taking advantage of rich and young Europeans trying to find God. They thought it was an easy target. They saw that, so they set up shop.
They saw all the money.
They saw all the money, so they set up shop, and they created Bhagwan, thinking that they wanted to belong and believing that having sex all day will send them to heaven. And if you notice when he said that like a little beam of light showed up above him, so it was kind of a nice little tasteful thing. But he didn't. He still thinks to this day that it's still a con. It's still a con.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a con. And of course, we talk about the ranch. And everyone, forgot about the ranch. Which is actual
the Big Muddy Ranch.
The Big Muddy Ranch,
which
is a character.
Yeah, and it used to be Rajneeshpuram. Rajneeshpuram.
That was the original one, so they took over Antelope.
Yeah,
and
I got
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now it was bought by Dennis Washington, who's a billionaire
in Montana.
So he bought the ranch and he gave it to Young Life, which is a Christian youth organization. Now, John Silvertooth has other words to say about that, which was really kind of funny. Where he says we went from free sex Rajneeshis to no sex Young Life. He says it's kind of like a cult too, but nobody's perfect, right? But they're better neighbors than they were, and they're not waving AK-47s in your face. So, he had a little light heart. Honestly, I want to. Maybe one day we should make a pilgrimage to Antelope just to see. Well, we're not going to go up to Antelope unless we're invited to go, because I want to see his collection of stuff. I was just looking at it because you see it behind him the whole time we're going through this journey together. And it's like, oh man, I would love to have one of those T-shirts. Anyway, so of course it comes back to Swami. Now, this is what Swami's opinion was.
Now he's talking about the government.
He's talking about the government.
Okay.
Yes, he is.
Our United States government.
Yeah, the United States government. Not just the U.S. government, but also the people.
Just the people in general society. Right?
That they trade on people's fear. They totally misrepresented who you are. Now when he's talking, they go from old interviews to new interviews. This is he's saying this in an interview when he was already gone and he's about to leave. He may have not left the ranch yet because he was still all in red, but he was
he was still officially representing
them. Yes, he said the U.S. has failed to recognize the most beautiful man ever seen. They failed to recognize the contribution that he had to offer to this country and to this world. And he also did mention that it's somewhat difficult and painful to talk about what happened to Osho in the United States. But then, of course, he talks about, before he died.
Osho said, hey, I wanted to talk to Swami, and he did call him in. And what did he say? He
said that he wanted me to clear his name about what happened in Oregon. So, of course, what it does is that after he says that, it starts to pan out him working on a book. And
Swami working
on a book. So,
well, gosh, now how many? We're talking 30 plus years, and he hasn't done this book.
Time. No, he's working on it. Oh, trust me, if it comes out, I might buy it. I just might buy it, just out of curiosity. And now, of course, this is what he said, that he calls him the Master of Masters. And then, of course, his final words in the documentary was what start the journey and change your life. And that's it. And, of course, now everyone's kind of closing everything out. They're closing the series down. Miss Shanti B, she brings up a lesson that Osho taught. Talked about the Zen master, seeing that his disciple was ready for enlightenment. So he struck his disciple with a stick and killed him. But before he did kill him, he received the enlightenment. Now her feelings were, did I miss the blow? It took many years for her to shake that thought of failure from her. She did write a book. It is Breaking the Spell. I bought it. I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it. It was a very hard book to find.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit just about that, the Zen master.
The Zen master, okay.
Okay, and then upon seeing that his disciple is about to be enlightened, he would strike him to kill him, and right before he died, he'd be enlightened. That doesn't make sense to me, because it's like he's jealous. I mean, to me, he doesn't want his.
Why
does he have to die in order to be enlightened?
Well, why is the Zen master even alive then? If he's the master of enlightenment?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It's like,
nope.
Well, he's threatened by that disciple becoming enlightened. He's going to kill him, but the one reward is he's enlightened right before they die. I don't understand that.
Well, you know what? I didn't even look at it that light. You know what? You brought up a very good point. Was it jealousy? Because one's actually legitimately living the life versus one playing a role?
That's right. So I think that in her saying that, Shanti B, she finally came to the fact that, you know what? She did not miss the blow.
No, she didn't miss the blow. She didn't miss the blow. And then, that's...
Okay, so let's the wrap up on Sheila.
Now it's the wrap up on Sheila. Now, Sheila, that's the last thing that Miss Shanti B says in the series.
In the series, okay.
Yeah, then Sheila, now it's, like I said, wrapping it up. Sheila, of course, the main, one of the main characters here. Yes, go ahead.
She asked the question, who am I? Okay. Doesn't know if she will go to heaven or hell. It doesn't matter. She said, I will create my own paradise.
Deliver that.
Then she says her last little thing to that Sannyasin community.
Yeah.
Because she does have the platform.
She does.
Sannyasin community, you are neglecting the whole experiment of Oregon by removing it from his biography. Don't kill him by concentrating and feeling ashamed of this scandal. Don't forget, every one of us was part of that scandal. And that is why I know she was directing it to them, because a lot of these people are still involved in that circle of 20. And I think that Jay, remember we called him Jay, Jananadata, that the the banker.
Yeah, he's still involved.
Yeah, he's still involved. He's the head of it.
He's the head of it, yes, correct.
Yes, in fact, they were married at one point.
That's right, they were.
But
I missed this. Oh my gosh, I forgot they were married.
And so I'm sure it was just for her to be coming over to the United States.
Probably.
The sham marriage and stuff.
Oh, good point.
But she's just saying that you're taking that part out because they want to erase Sheila.
Yeah.
And they still have the blood on their hands too, because they were all involved in the scandal.
Yeah, and you know what? With her saying and regarding the same people who drugged him as the same people who are looting his riches, we'll get into that in a wrap-up show. So sure enough, after everything is all said and done, what does Sheila say?
She said, "Are we done?" And they said yes. And she goes, "Oh, my life! I thought it would never end." This interview process, and she says we definitely all need a drink. Well, According to what I read, she had like almost 4 days of interviews.
Oh, that's exhausting.
And she had this big thing. But obviously they cut it up. But it would have been fascinating for me to watch 4 days of interviews.
Yeah, you know what? I bet you it's out there.
I doubt it.
Well, no, if they release a DVD,
well, they might later, because
a collection
this is
or something. This is so fascinating.
Success that if they do, like you said, release that DVD set,
unedited interviews with all the we'll cover that.
No, because Carl and I feel like these are like people we really know now.
Well, and the thing too is, folks, is that If you think we only watch these things one time, you're nuts.
I think I watched each episode no less than 5 times.
Yeah, I'm about averaging
and that doesn't count the first time that I watched
when we decided,
months ago.
When it first came out. When this first came out, I was like, oh man. Oh, I'm a junkie for this stuff. I'm like,
well, you were the one that told me about it.
Dude, I've been telling everybody about this. I'm like, you guys need to watch this. And sure enough, man, I ate this alive.
So we've had a really good time just getting this ready and presenting these episodes for you.
Yeah, and you know, like I said, you can't make this stuff up. And just like when we talk to other people about certain religions and our experiences with different belief systems, when we talk about some stuff that we do know for that is fact,
they can't believe
this. That I don't believe that. How stupid can you be? For example, you know, there's that TV show with what's her name?
Leah Remini. The Scientology, the Aftermath. We're not. Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
No, Leah Remini.
Just Google it. If you must not be breathing if you don't know about the Leah Remini show. Same thing. They talk about
stuff that you couldn't imagine.
Like, there's no. Yes, it does happen. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just a fascinating. You can't make it up, folks. You just can't make it up. So anyway, that's it for episode 6. I can't wait for our wrap-up show.
I can't wait either.
Oh my gosh. Oh, this is where we bring the big Louisville Slugger. Alrighty.
Okay.
Well, on that note, good night, Holly.
Good night, Carl.